So, welcome everyone to our first Monday of the month speaker series. We are, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ellen Schwartz. I am the coordinator of the Bergen County chapter of CHADD. And monthly, we have a speaker for our speaker series. But before I tell you about that, I lost my notes, but I can tell you that we also offer a support group run by Isabel Ibrahimi, and she does that the third Monday of every month. And Joni Korn and Andrea Elram run two parent support groups, one for pre-K through sixth graders and the other for seventh graders and up. And those are either the second or the fourth Wednesday of the month. And you can go on our website if you want more information and you want to see what the specifics are about upcoming meetings. So tonight, David, I can't find my notes. I just lost them. So
I've never been there before, Ellen. I've never done that, so I wouldn't know.
I know you have a hard time understanding my experience in the moment. Oh, wait, here it is. Okay. So yes. So just a little housekeeping before I introduce tonight's speaker. For the chat function, what we're going to do is ask you to stay on mute during David's talk. If you have any questions or comments related specifically to the talk, if you would please put it in the chat. At the end, we will, or David will go through them, or we will read them to him, and he will be able to respond. We'll have, the talk will be about 55 minutes. We'll stop at 9 o'clock for questions. So David Giwerc, did I say it right, David?
Good enough.
All right. He's a Master Certified ADHD Coach with the Professional Association of ADHD Coaches. He's also the founder and president of the ADD Coach Academy, which is the first and largest comprehensive ADHD coach training program that's fully accredited. He's a master ADHD coach. He's been coaching for 27 years, probably more. He's going to talk tonight about something that he was actually a pioneering researcher for. There's a book, Are There Character Strengths Associated with Adult ADHD? A comparison of ADHD adults and controls in the VIA Inventory of Strengths. He'll tell you what that VIA Inventory of Strengths is. And this book received one of the 4 Best Poster Research Awards at the 2016 APSARD conference. APSARD is a conference that's lots of doctors and neurologists. So that's quite a feather in your cap. He also has a groundbreaking book called Permission to Proceed, The Keys to Creating a Life of Passion, Purpose, and Possibility for Adults with ADHD. He shares, we're so delighted that he's here tonight sharing with us his unique and effective coaching models for gaining control of one's ADHD at home, work, and in the community. We're so thrilled to have you, David, and everybody who's here will be excited as they get to know you. All right, with no further ado, David, please.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. You should lose your notes more often and find them. Ellen, that was perfect. That was terrific. Thank you. Well, I'm honored to be here. Andrea Elstrom and Ellen a while ago asked me to do this. And of course, I love the thought of doing anything with CHADD because CHADD is important to me. As a matter of fact, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career. And so anytime CHADD asks me to come visit or present anything that I'm associated with, I'll be right there in a second. So thank you for having me. And with that, today I'm going to talk about something very dear to my heart, and that's ADHD coaching. But I'm going to talk about it in terms of, there's a lot of people out there that don't know what ADHD coaching is. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what coaching is and what the role of an ADHD coach is, not the whole thing, but in terms of how we use that process to move people forward, because ADHD coaching is different than therapy. It's different than counseling. It's a different profession. And yet many of you are familiar with the buzzword ADHD coaching, but many of you are not familiar with how it works and what it focuses on. So hopefully by tonight, in the short time that we have, you'll walk away with a better understanding of what ADHD coaching is and why it's so important. Because what we do, literally no one else in the world does. We're trained in a very specific arena of comprehensive treatment of ADHD. So, but we're part of a very important team. And we're going to describe the coaching process and the specialized skills that are accompanied with that. And then why do we have a strength focus? I'm going to talk about one of 5 strengths that we train coaches at the Academy to focus on. And those are character strengths. And most people are not aware of what those are, but there's a whole science behind strengths. And so you'll learn more about that. And then as we go through this whole understanding of coaching and the competencies and the roles and the strength focus, I'm going to talk specifically about character strengths and why the rationale specifically for the VIA character strengths, because we were the first and only organization to do a research project on what are the character strengths for adults with ADHD. And that research, as Ellen said, won an award, but more importantly, it led us in the direction to find out what research was out there that we could aggregate and access to bring into the coaching profession. And one of the big strengths that we all know anecdotally is a strength for ADHD is creativity. Well, we now have evidence, pure research evidence, that creativity and ADHD go hand in hand, and that is a character strength. So we'll talk about all these things as we're going through. So first of all, what is ADHD coaching? Okay, I'm not going to regurgitate these words for you, but you can read them. But what coaching is a partnership of equanimity. It's not a hierarchy. It's not the coach tells you what to do. It's a collaborative partnership of equanimity where the coach is there to facilitate a session, maybe for the first time in a client's life, where they have the ability to be able to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to be observed. And in that process, the coach is working with that client to give them greater self-awareness. Many of our clients are what we call verbal processors. They think out loud, but ideas and thoughts about how they function in the world have been imprisoned in their brain. And many times they have to be verbally processed out loud. One of many things we do is processing modalities. But in that process of coaching awareness and collaborative partnership, coaching is about an automatic pause. Now, what does that mean? ADHD is a challenge of inhibition. Inhibition is the ability to self-regulate, the inability to be able to self-regulate and put on the brakes of your mind. To put on the brakes of your mind and stop and pause and pay attention to what you're paying attention and be able to self-regulate by identifying what are you thinking, what is the emotion you're feeling, and then discern, make a choice on that emotion. That's called executive function. And without that ability to be self-aware and have a pause, the ability of the ADHD brain is non-existent, because what people don't realize, in order to access that part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, you have to be able to have 25% of all the oxygen in your brain. How do we get that oxygen? Well, when you're anxious, when you're stressed, when you can't pay attention, when you're under pressure to perform, your breathing is horrendous. It's faster, it's quicker. You don't get the oxygen that you need to be able to take self-initiative. If your brain, the part of your brain that makes you human, is not working, you can't take self-initiative. So first and foremost, ADHD coaching is about an automatic pause where the coach and the client is asked a question, the client asks a question that's so engaging and interesting that there's a natural conversation and flow, and the client finally feels safe in an environment where they begin to share. Okay, that's the purpose of it. But what a coach does is we have a set of specialty skills, and we don't dictate what the client is going to learn. We invite, we ask for permission. The first one is to educate them about their ADHD. A high percentage of people, I would say 75% of the people that come to ADHD coaching know very little about their ADHD. I'm not talking about understanding the concept of ADHD. I'm talking about understanding how the specific brand of that individual's ADHD shows up. And that educating them about ADHD means they have to understand things like situational variability, what interest does, what boredom does, what pressure does, what stress does, all these different things, how they learn. And so education is crucial. It's essential. And as you know, a majority of people are not diagnosed with ADHD. And when they are, they're not even educated about it. So one of the roles of an ADHD coach is to have models, to have tools, to have resources, to have skills, to be able to educate them about their ADHD using metaphors, using visuals. We have models that we've created that takes the invisible challenges of ADHD and makes them visible. And we have to give them permission. You know, I wrote the book called Permission to Proceed. Well, you can't give yourself permission to proceed until you embrace that you're uniquely wired. You're not broken. You never have been broken. You have trillions of options in your brain. And all you have to do is find a half dozen of those unique wirings and patterns in your brain to convey your unique way of living in the world. And that means embracing your neurodiverse brains. You're not broken, you have a unique brain wiring. That's what the coach does. And then we begin to explore, how does your ADHD manifest? I was able to write a book by using voice-activated software and mind maps. When I was in college, I couldn't even write a 2-page paper. It took me 2 weeks because I couldn't get the ideas out of my head onto some format that I could see. So we have to explore and find systems for the way we learn, the way we do things. I'm also a kinesthetic learner. If you put me in a boring situation, in a boring lecture, in a boring anything, you might as well shoot me if I can't move. Might as well shoot me, even with my meds. That's how I'm wired. I'm not broken. That's how I do it. And we have to energize our clients by encouraging the integration of their hidden strengths, the buried treasure. And the other piece is identifying sources of positive emotion. So I want you to think about this. We live in a world that focuses on impairments. We live in a world that focuses on pathology. We live in a world that teaches us how to manage anxiety, how to manage stress. But I want you to think about, when's the last time somebody ever came up to you and said, I'd like you to identify the sources of positive emotion that you can access whenever you need them? Because I was never asked that, nor were you. Let alone people with ADHD don't identify their strengths, they bury them, because even if they're easily granted, they're often taken for granted. We take for granted the things that come naturally to us, even people with ADHD, I will tell you even more so. So if you're focused on weakness, if you're focused on pathology at the expense of strengths and positive emotions, what are you paying attention to? You're paying attention to negative emotion and weakness. That does not serve the ADHD brain very well. And then lastly, we have to empower them to create their own kind of action plans that work the way their brain works. I want you to think about this. How many of you start your day off by focusing on the things that you feel you have to do at the expense of the things you want to do? Just keep that in mind, because research shows that the most of you will do the things that are boring and mundane because you feel you have to get it out of the way before you get to do the things that activate and empower you. And by that time of day, and you've worked on doing all those boring, mundane, stressful, anxiety-producing things, you've got no energy left at the end of the day. By the way, we only have a limited amount of executive function in our brain. You got to use it and use it powerfully. So That's what we do. We educate, we energize, we empower, we embrace. But there's a mindset. And the mindset is every human being with ADHD is unconditionally accepted. And we look from a place of appreciation. There's actually a whole science, a whole discipline called appreciative inquiry. A guy by the name of a guy at Case Western created it. And coaching comes from that, but not totally. That when I inquire about somebody, I look at them from a place of strength, from a place of potential, from a place of uniqueness, a place of capabilities and wholeness. We're not broken, we're whole, but we're looking for the pieces of our puzzle that are broken to put them together so we can be whole. And this is where we take the pause break. The mindset is when we go in, we take a pause to tell our clients, hey, listen to the question, take some oxygen in, breathe, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to pay attention to me, because this is the purpose of coaching. I guarantee you will not see this definition anywhere else because I just created it 30 minutes ago. Okay. And it's based on years and years of stuff that I'm doing. So I'm going to come up with a different definition tonight just for this presentation. You won't find it anywhere else. And this is what the purpose of coaching is. First of all, we create a natural pause. One of the biggest challenges for people with ADHD, and research shows, is emotional intelligence. The ability to pause and identify an emotion as it's occurring in the moment and discern how that emotion is serving us so that we can move forward. And the way we teach the pause is by teaching people to notice feelings in their body. Everything that starts in your brain shows up in your body, but nobody ever taught us that. So in that moment, we have a client, we're teaching them to breathe, to pause, to identify the feelings in their body. And we ask them, how is what you are paying attention to serving you? Do you know I've had clients that told me that's the first time in their life anybody's ever asked them that? How is what you are paying attention to serving you? They had no idea. And they have the feeling in their body, and now they have the prompt. Nothing gets activated in life. 50% of everything we do is visual. You have to have a prompt to remember. Look, Ellen was looking for her notes. She needs visuals. I need visuals. I need PowerPoint. Yeah, I can do it off the top of my head, but it won't be nearly as powerful to have a prompt that tells me, what do I need to activate my brain? Coaching is not about looking at weakness. It's about revving up your engine. If ADHD, first and foremost, is a challenge of momentum. Think about this. If you can't get your engine going and you're in the garage and you can't get your engine to your car going, you're going to be stuck in the garage all day long. And yet we don't think about how we're going to get our engine going. One of the ways we get our engine going is by accessing sources of inspiration, not just motivation, talking inspiration, things that the moment you think about, you get so inspired, it activates your heart and your head to gain, here's the key, sustainable. It's not enough to just act. You have coaching, and ADHD coaching is about one of the biggest challenges for people with ADHD, sustaining it, sustainable intention, sustainable purpose. Attention without intention is zero. It goes nowhere. And we as human beings with ADHD are seeking meaning in our lives. Meaningful, desired outcomes, not just goals, outcomes. Outcomes. What is it that you want the outcome to be? So it's about activation. It's about positive emotion. It's about sustainable intention. And it's about putting it all together with a meaningful purpose that will activate your brain. Interest is a fine start, but it's not going to take care of everything. Interest just opens up the door. Now, here's the coaching process. Again, this is something that most of you have not seen. This is a process that we were involved in with ADDCA in helping PAAC identify the coaching process, which distinguishes coaching from all other coaching professions in the world. That ADHD coaching is different because these PAAC essentials come with an ADHD lens. When you are learning to become a coach, what separates you from a life coach is you are listening to your client, witnessing your client, creating action plans for your client, reinventing with your client from the perspective of how does their ADHD show up in their life not just with impairments, but how about hyperfocus? How about hypofocus, daydreaming? How about creativity? How about exuberance? Do you know that research shows that one of the positive attributes of ADHD is exuberance, but only in certain situations. You have to have that ADHD lens, and you have to educate your clients to understand that we are looking at their lives not as being broken, but as a unique brain wiring. And we create safety by helping them embrace that brain wiring. You can never move a client forward without a safe environment. That's all coaching. But with an ADHD client, if they don't know that you as a coach don't understand them, the need to be understood, the need to be connected, the need to belong, these are absolutely vital needs for people with ADHD. And in coaching, we begin to have those needs met by letting them know we're hearing you, we're listening to you, but more importantly, we understand what you're going through with your ADHD. ADHD doesn't make you who you are, it's what you have. Who you are is who you choose to be. That's a whole other thing that we're going to talk about in coaching, okay? But we're collaborating. And when I say collaborating, the coach is there to facilitate the session, to ask the questions of the client, whether it's a 9-year-old or a 90-year-old. You know, a 9-year-old processes information differently than a 90-year-old, of course. But we're getting that 9-year-old into the process of learning to pause and pay attention to what they're paying attention, so they can begin to develop a decision-making process called executive function. Nobody teaches them that. They have to learn to collaborate as part of a team and understand that there's a process to making decisions and choices and actions. So collaboration is, let's explore what works. Do you need to move around when you're bored? Do you need to draw pictures? Do you need somebody to give you a PowerPoint? Do you need somebody to give you a recording of the class so you're not under pressure and sweating like a pig because you're trying to take the notes down, and at the end of class, you can't even read it because you got dysgraphia? Anybody familiar with that? That was my life, okay? Doesn't work. You got to find the system. Growth, 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 growth. How do we access the things that inspire us to take the action, to take the risk, to grow? Because so many people with ADHD have perfectionistic tendencies. They are prejudging the outcome before they even start. We have to take that attachment to outcome out of it and let them know that anything in life is a laboratory. There is no final outcome. There's only revisions. In the word revision is the word vision. How does one get to the growth or the revision of growth in their life? By taking action and revising every action they take to get closer to their vision. That's what revisions mean. There is no such thing as failure. If your heart stops working and you can't replace that heart, yes, that's a physical failure. But if you choose to take an action in the growth phase and you don't get the result that you want, that's a learning experience. Revise it, take another action until you make enough revisions so that you get that vision of what you want. And then there's possibilities. Now, this is a term that when my clients hear this, it freaks them out. Possibilities, future. I can't even deal with the present. How am I going to deal with the future? Because people with ADHD have a hard time with the future. But this is where we give them, empower them to do what I call in my book that I wrote 12 years ago. And I've been doing this for 27 years, but I knew that permission to proceed is what clients have to be given. That inside of them is a buried treasure, a hidden treasure that needs to be excavated out, identified, and embraced. And that's a process because clients don't always embrace it. Now, why strengths? Why positivity and why strengths? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, research shows us that there's a negativity bias of the human brain. Whether you're ADHD or not doesn't matter. The human brain has a propensity and a pervasive focus on the negative. Bad is stronger than good. How do we know this? A guy by the name of Baumeister, I think he's at the University of Florida. I forgot where he is. He's moved to a lot of places. Did research in 2001. Big, extensive, huge research project. And what he found is that people, all people, tend to focus on problems rather than possibilities, negative rather than positive. And I'm talking negative here about things that immobilize you. If you do something poorly and you improve it, That's not bad. But if it's negative and you ruminate and you can't shift out of that rumination and you're immobilized, that's not what we want. So you have to learn to pause and pay attention to bad is stronger than good. Why? Because what you pay attention to grows. We're going to talk about that in a second. You create neurochemicals in your brain. And if the cultural focus is on managing impairments and weaknesses, that weakness creates a neurology in the brain that creates neurochemicals that don't work very well for you. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's science behind coaching. There's just like there is in therapy and CBT. Russ Ramsey, one of my best buddies over at the University of Pennsylvania, we do a lot of work together. In fact, we just did a seminar together, a webinar. Some of you may have been there for Attitude Magazine. And I want to let you know, 2,300 people showed up for that. 2,300 people. That's where the understanding of coaching is integrated with other disciplines like CBT. Russ, 20 some odd years ago, knew what we were doing was important. He was a pioneer to accept us. Thank God for people like Russ. Okay, now this is key. There is no definitive language for what's best in people. Until the Character, Strengths, and Virtues, CSV, came out in 1999, which was really 4 years later. It came, the Academy was founded in that year, but it didn't come out for about 4 or 5 years later. But what we're really competing with, the dominant language, is the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And the DSM-5 identifies pathology, disorders, impairments, and that's what we focus on. And the Character, Strengths, Virtue focuses on what's the best in each human being. It has 6 virtues, cognitive virtues, emotional virtues, courageous virtues, self-regulation virtues, everything in life. And each of those virtues are character strengths, 24 of them, which all humans possess. Now, there's one thing that you have to remember. This is really critical. Maybe some of you have not heard this word. It's called situational variability, but it's a fancy name for, in certain situations, your ADHD is going to show up in impairments, and in certain situations, your ADHD, there will be no executive function impairments. Your executive function will work perfectly. And those are in areas of interest, in areas of inspiration, in areas of strengths, all the good stuff. But it's not enough, because the good stuff neurologically doesn't stay in your brain as long as the negative stuff. We're going to talk about that in a second. But clinical data, clinical research shows us that every human being, as a matter of fact, Tom Brown is a good friend of mine. We've had discussions about that. We created a model that talks about situational variability. I can't go into it now, but what I can tell you is when interest and intention, or inspiration and intention, are aligned, inhibition works better, your ability to pause, and the ignition in your brain gets going so that you can use all your executive function, and the hyper focus, the positive hyper focus of ADHD is on big time. That represents a whole other set of problems. But all the studies have shown that there are contextual factors. All of you know this thing called the paradox of ADHD. That's what situational variability is. How come I can catch a baseball going 90 miles an hour, but I couldn't pay attention to Miss Nitch, my math teacher, in the 7th grade? Because she was boring. She snored me to death. She was so freaking boring. Baseball is exciting. Tennis is exciting. Writing a paper that I love and passion is exciting. Making a presentation like this is exciting. But put me in a room with a boring, mundane teacher that doesn't engage me, and my executive function and my impairment is going to show up big time. That's the paradox of ADHD. So coaches don't look at the weakness and impairment. We look at what activates the brain. But the most important thing that you have to walk away with today is the story that you pay attention to grows. It grows in the physical world, externally, and it grows neurologically in the internal world. Okay? It grows literally neural pathways in your brain. Now, here's what I want you to think about. That when you pay attention to a negative story of feeling broken, and that's your dominant program, I'm saying dominant, The way the brain works is the dominant thoughts that you have creates electricity, electrical currents. And those electrical currents eventually hit the end of a path and are converted into neurochemicals. Many of you are familiar with dopamine. Dopamine is the reward neurochemical. It also helps you pay attention. It also helps you with executive function. But let me tell you what happens, because our brains are structured architecturally for emotion. We are emotional beings. And a negative thought generally turns into a negative emotion. And that negative emotion can turn into neurochemicals like adrenaline, which is fight or flight, or cortisol, which is the stress hormone. I've had clients who've had heart attacks that were in their 70s or 80s from undiagnosed ADHD, undue stress, exacerbated stress and anxiety that they created in their head. And when they learned with coaching that I've got to learn to pause and pay attention to the story that grows, here's what they learned. Here's what science tells you. You got to know this, guys. One negative story that dominates can create neurochemicals like adrenaline and cortisol that stay in your brain and body for 24 hours. 24 hours. Do you know how long a positive story stays in your brain? A story of an emotion, an experience, a memory that I access from my brain, which I call magnificent me moments, these moments where I hit a shot to win a game in triple overtime, where I made a presentation and got a standing ovation, whatever it was, I can access that. And in that moment, I can feel the inspiration and positive emotion and positive neurochemicals that I create, but they only stay in my brain and body for 6 hours. 1/4 the negative. So remember what I said about Baumeister, bad is stronger than good. It's not only bad is stronger than good in terms of the priority and focus, it's stronger internally, neurologically, in terms of the chemicals that it creates in our body and our brain. So every time you don't pause to pay attention and your dominant pattern has not been changed, because that's the way we work, you go right to the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain first. And the part of the brain that identifies it is where your ADHD exists. It's called the prefrontal cortex. And guess what? If you don't have a coach or a therapist or somebody to help you pause and breathe, you are going to be in what's called an amygdala hijack, rumination. Your amygdala is taking over and your prefrontal cortex cannot identify the emotion as it's occurring. That's called emotional intelligence. The pause allows that. So in coaching, one of the first things we're doing is we're listening to the story of our clients. We're helping them to learn to pay attention to signals in their body and pause and ask, how is the story that you're paying attention to serving you? Because it grows. I'm just going to go through this fast. You guys know this language. I'm broken. That's the unhealthy story. The healthy stories have a unique brain wiring. I got trillions of ways I process. The unhealthy story is I have no control over my performance. I suck at everything. No, you don't suck at everything. You might be lousy at math. You got a D in math, but a D in math doesn't mean you're terrible at everything. Just maybe have to get better in math. You might be great at English or great at phys ed or great in something else. But when I pause, you see, there is a fallacy out there. The fallacy is that all human beings have control over their choices. That is the biggest fallacy in the world of humankind. And this is what ADHD coaching and therapists know and psychologists know. Without the pause, there is no control. Without the ability to pause and breathe and take in the oxygen, you can't make decisions. You're controlled by your emotion. That's what rumination is. And this is a skill, by the way, even though people with ADHD have inhibitory challenges, which means they have a challenge with putting on the brakes of their mind and filtering out all those distractions, I assure you that learning to pause is a skill that everybody on this call can learn. Everybody can learn it. I highly recommend you go out, you get a book called Emotional Intelligence to learn how to do it, but you need somebody to help you do this because it's harder to do on your own. It's much easier to do as part of a process that's natural and somebody reminding you to pay attention to your body. But no good decisions are made without the pause. Discernment is an executive function. The ability to distance yourself, not be immersed from the emotion, distance yourself from the emotion and say objectively, not emotionally, how is this story that I'm paying attention to serving me? and make a rational decision, not an emotional one. And of course, if you make better decisions, you're going to perform better. My ADHD is not who I am. It's what I have. It's my brain wiring. What I have does not dictate who I am. What I have has to be understood, because once I understand how it works, I can make it work for me. I can make better decisions. I can say that who I am is not my impairment. In fact, who I am is exuberance. Who I am is creativity. Who I am is all the VIA character strengths that I'm going to share with you, because we've proven in science that those make you up who you are. Okay. I can't read what I've got here, but I think, because everybody's blocked me, but I believe I have no strengths is a fallacy. I cannot tell you how many clients over the years with ADHD have told me I have no strengths. And I give them the evidence right there. Well, wait a minute. What about this that you just did? You just built a business. You just had success with this exam. You just had a successful relation. No, I was lucky. No, you weren't lucky. You did it. People, the line that I always like to use with things that are easily granted are often taken for granted. And these are innately wired in the brain of every human being, and we have to embrace them. Okay. And the healthy story is I have strengths and weaknesses. There's a balance, but I don't let the weaknesses overcome me. I activate my heart and my head with the things I do well, and I bring those areas of strengths into my areas of weakness. It's completely opposite of what's in the school systems, what's in the workplace, what's in the families. Complete opposite. And in fact, this makes sense to most of you, but many of you will resist it. Don't learn to embrace what's already natural for you. I mean, this is not brain science here, guys. Well, in some ways it is actually, because we're supporting it with brain science, but it's common sense. And yet it takes a lot of work to achieve these things. Okay. John Wooden. Those of you who don't know John Wooden was the all-time winningest basketball coach in the history of college basketball. Love this man. He was an English teacher. And I named guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the all-time leading scorer in the sport. John Wooden was his coach. If you know anything about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he is much more than a basketball player. He's an activist. He's a man with tremendous character. And what John Wooden taught all his players, and these guys went on not only to be great basketball players, but leaders in their communities, politicians, inventors, business people, doctors, all more concerned with the character that defined who they were rather than the reputation of performance. Because if you define yourself by what you do and how well you do it, the moment you don't do it well, who you are is going to be destroyed. Your self-esteem is going to go down the tubes. And we have research to prove that. So before we get into the VIA character strengths, I'm doing pretty good with time. Very important concept here. The difference between character and reputation. And you have to understand that character is about the heart. Character is about the soul. Character is about that internal place inside of you where you're authentic and genuine and you're not afraid to be your real self. Reputation, on the other hand, is that person that's worried about making money, is worried about acquisitions, is worried about labels, is worried about credentials and certifications, which are important, but that doesn't make me who I am. See, when I lose those credentials, someday I won't have those credentials anymore. I'll be old, I'll be retired, and who I will be will not be a coach. Who I will be will not be founder and president of the ADHD Coach Academy. Who I will be is my presence, my creativity, my kindness, my love, my social intelligence. That presence that makes me who I am will be with me for the rest of my life. On the other hand, what I do, my performance will not be. Because you see, who I am is heart and head in harmony. It's both. It's the compass that integrates both those things. Now, if you don't learn to pause and you don't learn to identify emotions and you are immobilized by your dominant story that says, I have to perform because that dominates your head, only your head. You know, people with ADHD, it has been shown, have much higher levels of perfectionism and cognitive distortions than do non-ADHD people. And the reason is because they're in their heads a lot. They don't challenge these stories, these beliefs that are made up, that you're broken because you didn't get an A, or you're broken because you didn't do it the same way everybody else does. Bullshit. Excuse my French. I'll say it in ballet language. Bolshoi. Bolshoi. Okay? That's what it means, because I'm going to tell you right now, you dance to your step. When you learn a waltz, you have to learn the steps. But once you learn those steps, you can dance any way you want. And that's what ADHD is. You're not stuck in your head by specific steps that limited you. Character is permanent. Kindness and love will never leave me. Empowering other people to be their best will never leave me. That will be with my family, that will be with my friends, that will always be who I am. Just so happens I bring that into my profession. But let me tell you about reputation. That is most definitely temporary. Let me tell you how. I've been coaching entrepreneurs for 20 some odd years. In 2009, when we hit a recession, the clients, I had two kinds of clients. I had the who's and the what's. I had the characters and the reputation performance people. The people who had very successful businesses that defined who they were by how well their businesses did went into deep states of depression. The other people who were character-based realized that I built my business, yes, to make money, to be profitable, but these are tough times. I'm going to represent my business based on the essence of who I am. I'm going to be kind to every customer. I'm going to be available to them. I'm going to give them the best deals. And although their business may have leveled off and gone down, their customers remain loyal, so that when the recession ended, the people that were living their businesses on reputation, their businesses didn't rise nearly as fast as the people who were the character-based ones, because those customers stayed with those people because they were authentic. They were genuine. It wasn't just about their money. It was about who they were as human beings. And that's what coaching is. Now, this is a huge concept. Some of you may or may not know this, but there's a whole science on self-compassion. If you want to read a great book, get Kristen Neff's book, NEFF, on self-compassion. There's a whole science on self-compassion. The ability to embrace yourself when you do things wrong. The ability to say, I'm a human being. I don't do everything perfectly. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not. And the ability to create a very powerful neurochemical in your brain by self-love, self-compassion, called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the neurochemical that allows people to bond and connect with other people. During this pandemic, our oxytocin levels and our serotonin levels are way down because we're not connecting physically. Our brains require physical connection. Self-esteem, on the other hand, that's like the guys I was talking about. The moment their performance went down, you know what that term self-esteem comes from high schools in California in the 70s. And what they did is their kids had poor self-esteem. So what they did is they dumbed down the curriculum so the kids would get better grades, and their self-esteem went up until they went to another school with a harder curriculum. And you know what happened? Their grades went down, and you know what happened to their self-esteem, as opposed to a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Carol Dweck. Our brains are not fixed. They're neuroplastic. We have the ability to change the architecture of our brains by repeating things that work well for us. Repetition, repetition, repetition. But it's about knowing, not beliefs. Very quick. I learned this concept of knowing versus belief from a very, very famous psychologist who died about 5 years ago. His name is Wayne Dyer. I love that man. He taught me a lot. And what he said is, we have all kinds of beliefs that were handed down from generation to generation. And we make these beliefs as though we know them and there are truths, but they are not. They have to be challenged. The belief that I have to take care of everybody else before I take care of myself is a story. The story that if I don't do things the way everybody else is, means I'm broken, is a story. A knowing, on the other hand, is a memory, is an actual experience that we access from our brains, of a memory, of an experience where you know where your character's shown up, where you know you were loving, where you know you were kind, where you know you were genuine or authentic, when you know you could laugh and love and do it genuinely, and then choose what you do. Because the bottom line is you're out of integrity if who you are and what you do are not aligned. And we've got millions and trillions of people, so many people living in this world who are out of integrity with themselves. Well, ADHD gives you an opportunity to be in integrity with yourself. I know this firsthand because at age 39, when I was age 38, when I was diagnosed, I was out of integrity with myself. I was that what person was doing very successful in the performance arena, but very unsatisfied in the character area. And I went and shifted. It's when I became a coach. Now, the VIA character strengths. This is all about the who. It's scientifically proven about the who, psychometrically proven. It's valid, it's reliable. But these are human capacities that you can take for free. See that link up there? www.viacharacter.org. You will go, it will take you 20 to 30 minutes. You'll have 120 statements, and all you will do is say, this is least like me, most like me, or neutral. Do not overthink this. If you overthink it, you will not do well. Do not answer it in terms of how you think you want people to think of you. Only answer it in terms of how you think of yourself. If you do it any other way, it will not be accurate. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I can tell you, I have not found one client, hundreds and hundreds, and my coaches use it, maybe thousands now, that always are able to acknowledge these strengths, and they say it is a very exact replica of how they perceive themselves. This is how you perceive yourself. Doesn't mean it's a strength or weakness. It means that if kindness is up there, number one, your first 5 to 6 strengths, that means these are the things that make you come alive. Being creative makes you come alive. Self-regulation doesn't make you come alive, but it's necessary. It's essential. And I'm going to share something with you about these character strengths. It's going to blow your mind, because it still blows my mind every time I do it with my clients. But these are psychometrically valid and reliable. Martin Seligman, famous author, head of the psychology department at the University of Pennsylvania, is one of the founders of the VIA and the whole arena of positive psychology. The VIA is the foundation for positive psychology. It's reliable. It's valid. So you got 24 character strengths. All 24 of these are capacities in different situations. The first 5 to 7 are going to show up in all areas of your life. So when you go do it, those first 5 to 7, you can ask, do these 5 to 7 make me come alive? Do these show up in most areas of my life? I'm going to show you something in a little while. Signature and phasic. This is just a fancy way of saying your top 5 of these 24. So mine is creativity, perspective, love, kindness, and fairness. Fairness. Oh my God, fairness is huge. Fairness is what got me into coaching. But all 24 of these will show up in your life. The first 5 to 7, concentrate on those first. Get a coach to work with that'll help you with this, or anybody that's really well versed in it. Everything happens in pairs. You do not express one character strength without at least 2. At least 2. So when you're looking at this, love and kindness will go together. Creativity and fairness will go together. At least 2. In fact, you will have situations in your life and memories that you will eventually access that use all 5 to 7 of your top signature strengths. Matter of fact, those are the ones that I have prompts for. I have specific pictures that they use all my signature strengths. So when I forget, all I got to do is look at one picture and the inspiration immediately rushes to my brain automatically. They're always expressed in a context. You cannot just take these words and use them. You have to align them with an experience, a memory, a momentum, something in your past or that just happened that you can decipher, you can discern that accesses positive emotion. What people don't realize about the character strengths, they are automatic sources of positive emotion. Automatically. The moment that you access these words with a memory, with a clue of how you use those words, you will be amazed at how fast those emotions come back to you. So emotions don't die. The physical experience that we may have had in the past is gone, but the emotion, the spirit, the energy that went to it never dies. Okay? So all of these are strengthened with experience and memory. Memory is crucial. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, they say people with ADHD don't have good memories. I say Bolshoi again, Bolshoi big time, because you know why? We have great memories, especially in areas that are inspirational, but we've buried them. What coaching is about is asking you to begin to dig out those memories that have been buried. That's what we call the buried treasure. Okay. Now, these are the 24 character strengths. Let me share something with you that's very interesting. When you use these, they improve self-regulation and executive function situationally. How? I'm gonna challenge you. If you can prove me wrong, I'll take you out to dinner somewhere. You call me up, I'll take you out. You'll never prove me wrong, so I'm not worried. You take your top 5 to 7 character strengths. For example, let's say one of them is fairness, kindness, and creativity. And you have a specific event. Like for me, I created the academy because I knew people with ADHD were treated unfairly. So I created these very creative models that talked about hope and kindness. And I put those into it, but put the science behind it. So it was creative, but I used science, but it was all about fairness. Now, here's what happens. The moment I access those 3 character strengths, and I mean the moment I have the experience of remembering how hard it was to get accreditation, and the moment I got that accreditation, I can feel the positive emotion buzzing in my brain. But how do I access that positive emotion? I have to pause. I have to pause to go in and access. You know what that is? That's self-regulation. My lowest strength for me, self-regulation, is number 24. Doesn't make me come alive, but I can't do anything without it. What makes the self-regulation go up to number 1 are the things that inspire me. Nobody taught us this. This is anecdotal. That hasn't even been proven. But someday I hope to get somebody to support the research, because I can tell you every single person with ADHD that goes in and accesses their top via character strengths has better self-regulation, has better perseverance, the ability to sustain. Remember my definition? It's all here. The research shows across the world, these character strengths are universally part of the culture. And yet we don't pay attention. We were the first to identify in people with ADHD in adults. And it wasn't even a big study. But what it showed us, that one of the bigger areas of attributes was creativity and exuberance, energy, hyper-focus. Why don't we talk about these things? Because the rest of the world doesn't mean we don't have to. So it's universal. And if you use your signature strengths, and let me tell you, my everyday, I prioritize. Remember, I talked about revving up the engine. 5 minutes I've got. Oh boy, we're good. 5 minutes for something to you take away today. That is crucial. You will never move ahead in life, ever, 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 if you don't find the sources and well springs of positive emotion inside of you. If you focus on the negative, impairments, pathology, problems, and you don't activate your brain by focusing on the things that are authentic and genuine to you, which you all have, I guarantee you they are inside of you, and you will find them. You take the pressure off. Remember what pressure does to the brain? Terrible things. Take the pressure off. That's what a coach does. We take the pressure off you so that you can begin to pause and pay attention to, how does my creativity, how does my love of learning, big one for people with ADHD. How does my zest, big one for people with ADHD. Enthusiasm. Do you know what enthusiasm is in Greek? I'm going to tell you right now. It fits in with this, how we're going to end off. Enthusiasm in Greek means the God within us, the divine within us. People with ADHD, when they are exuberant and enthusiastic about the things they love, the people they love, the projects they love, the strengths that they possess, and the character that they have, there is nothing And I've manifested it in my life, and I know hundreds of people that I've worked with that were born into this world with enthusiasm, that buried it because they never knew that there was something new and exciting and ingenious that already existed inside of them. Something original, something unique. That's what creativity is about. So what I want you to get today, if there's nothing else, do not ever allow yourself to let yourself be broken, to let yourself focus on those things which deactivate the brain, which take you away from your character, which move you into the arena of performance only. Of course, we have to perform well in some things in our life, but not the things that are dictated to us, only the things that are authentic, unique, and inspiring. And there is a science behind that. And coaching is directly connected with that science, neuroscience, positive psychology, and we will continue to move in this direction because as part of comprehensive treatment, you can't just, it's very important to understand pathology, but it's not important to only focus on it. It's very important to know the strengths and the weaknesses, but there has to be a balance. But I can assure you, the way to start your day is only by activating the best inside of yourself. That's what the VIA is. That's what the science of VIA is. And that's what ADHD coaching is. Thank you very much for having me today, and I'll open it up for questions. Helen, you're on mute. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. I'm not seeing any, wait, let me see. Anybody put any questions in the chat? I have a question. So I work with a lot of kids and teenagers, and I'm wondering how, if you have any thoughts about integrating the VIA character strengths with younger people.
Yeah. So first of all, Ellen, great question. The VIA now has an index, has the actual profile and inventory for kids 10 to 18. So you can get that. And you can integrate it with kids in much the same way with adults, except tweaking the language. That's the first thing. So if we say interesting to a kid that's 10, they don't know what that means. You have to tweak it to say what's fun, what's playful. You know, you have to think like a test. So Ellen, I know you know that you do that naturally with these kids because you're like me, you're a child and you have that inner child in front of you. So when I'm working with kids and parents, I have to bring that inner child in. I can't bring the inner adult in, and I have to try to think like a kid. And so when I ask them what's fun and interesting, the whole coaching conversation changes. And then I integrate. So how do you integrate your creativity with having fun? How we have kids that are socially intelligent. How do you make friends? How do you use fun to make friends? Socially intelligent. So you find out that area that is really exciting for them. And I've never met a kid yet that didn't have something fun or playful that they wanted to talk about. So that's where I start from, because anything else is going to be a pressure. Anything you start with academics, Ellen, you know how that goes. It's very hard to start there. So, and from that, what I find is you can also learn to build customized systems. For example, a kid that's really playful that has a card collection, baseball cards. I ask him, your mother says your room is a mess and your homework is a mess, but how come your baseball card collection, she says, is pristine? It's perfect. How come? And he's shaking his head and he doesn't know why. And I said, well, let me ask you a couple of questions. What's more exciting for you, doing the cards or doing your homework? Okay. And we start to go through this process. And what ends up happening is we start to think of what are some creative ways that we can take things from what we learned in organizing cards and that system that we can bring into making homework more exciting, that we find the kid's very visual, that he's a verbal processor. How can we bring those things into his world of learning? Because he doesn't get to talk. He doesn't get to see things that are visual. He might be super curious and doesn't get to ask questions of his teacher. He might need PowerPoint. We start to develop accommodations based on what starts with a card collection, believe it or not. So that's what we mean about taking areas of strengths and bringing them into areas of weakness at any age level. But Ellen, very important what you're saying. The language is very important, because if you don't get that language, it's very hard to access memory. It's very hard for them to go into that experience and remember a time when they had fun. But you have one good experience and it leads to a whole bunch of other ones.
Thank you. That was great. So I don't know if anybody else has anything else in the chat here. Let's see.
I actually have a question for David.
Sure,
So-
Andrew.
First, I want to say that I'm actually a student of David's, and the Academy itself is an amazing place, and it has changed my life significantly for the better. So I just needed to say that. But I also wanted to say that I use magical moments on the mountain with my clients, and I know that you called it something else. I'm wondering if you could just speak to that activity, because I think it's very powerful.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you for those beautiful words. It just reinforces my purpose when you say stuff like that. Thank you so much. So when we were talking before, we talked about how important it is when we're using character strengths, not to just have the words, because we have the definitions of these words. Those words don't mean anything unless we go in and we access positive emotion. And there's a lot of positive emotion located in the hippocampus of our brain and memory. And we have to be able to, and these memories are very powerful. When we access, I'm not talking about the negative emotions that we ruminate. I'm talking about the ones where we graduated from high school, we got from college, we did something great. And unfortunately, most people with ADHD bury them. Why? They don't even remember them, because it was just another thing on a list to knock off the list and go to the next thing. They never were given the opportunity to pause and celebrate those wonderful experiences for a long period of time. And the way the brain works is, if you don't pause to pay attention to something long enough to sustain, you can't register in the brain. The way we create memory is by sustaining our focus long enough on it to create a memory. And then we compartmentalize that memory. But how do we access that memory? Well, one of the ways we access that memory is through prompts, visual cues, auditory cues, musical cues. So years ago, when I got into coaching, I realized that a lot of my clients had buried strengths. The VIA wasn't even available back then. But what I realized is they had phenomenal strengths that were buried. And the only way that we could access the positive emotion to sustain those strengths and actually give them permission to proceed. In my book, Permission to Proceed, I wrote about what Andrea is talking about with anecdotes, tons and tons of anecdotes. And what I found clearly is, once we were able to identify these memories, these magnificent me moments, where you did something with your strengths that was very powerful, but it had to exude emotion. If you didn't have emotion, then it would just be satisfying, because emotion, everything that we organize in our lives is organized by memory. And the most powerful memory we have is emotional memory. Unfortunately, the most powerful memory that people with ADHD have is negative memory. So we have to work that much harder. Remember, 24 hours versus 6 hours. If we can identify magical moments, as Andrea calls them, or magnificent me moments, where we did something so powerful that reflects who we are, the character, and exudes that positive emotion that never dies. Positive emotion never dies. It's eternal and internal. It never dies. You just have to access it. So magical moments, magnificent me moments, are these memories that we can access whenever we choose to. And we ask our clients to go identify them, talk about them. Some people create songs about them, create lyrics to them, unbelievable stuff. But most people just create a prompt. Like, I have a basketball on my desk that I have ICF and PAAC on my desk, the logos, to remind me where the academy came from and how long ago that was. And then I have other pictures of my family. I have 10 pictures. And at any given moment, I can look at any of those 10 pictures and I can immediately access a very powerful moment and experience from the past that automatically exudes positive emotion. But here's what's even better about it. In those days years ago, I didn't have the character strengths. I can actually, the beauty behind those magnificent me moments, these are very powerful and you need a coach to work with them. I can take these memories and I can show you exactly where my fairness, my social intelligence, all my character strengths were demonstrated. But I can do something even more. I can show you exactly the processing modalities, the learning modalities that I used to create the systems that allowed me to write my book, that allowed me to create the academy, all the systems that I did successfully, and take those systems and integrate them into other areas of my life. So imagine with one picture of one memory, I can access my character strengths, all the positive emotions, and all the different ways I learn. One picture, one emotion, one memory. But you got to do the work. I can assure you, Andrea worked very hard to get that moment. It didn't come naturally. Some people it takes a year or longer. Some people get it instantaneously. But that's the first part. The second part is to embrace it, to reinforce it. Because here's the other piece. The human brain works on neuroplasticity. Your brains have established neural patterns that are very hard to overcome. As a matter of fact, they're very hard to override. I've got some that are still there, but I've created new neural pathways by repetition, and one of them was rumination. I would ruminate over things. People could give me the wrong expression, I would leave a party just by a look. No more. Once in a while, I have it happen. But after 38 years of my life in 1 year with a coach and doing the work on myself, I completely stopped ruminating and had an episode last year that I was able to get out of in 1 hour. But I was able to get out by everything that I learned. So sometimes we teach what we need to know. I'm thankful that what I taught, I was able to know and implement. And that's what coaches do. We have to know, we have to do it for ourselves and model it for you. So when Andrea, you see what Andrea said? I use that exercise and it's changed my life. She does it and it has changed her life. I happen to know it has, because she uses that to change the neural patterns in her brain and access them whenever she needs them. And it will overcome the negative ones, but takes repetition, time, and discipline. And that all comes from the power of the pause. See, it's all a full circle. The power of the pause, without the power of the pause, there is no cause. There is none. So it all comes together. But that's a beautiful exercise that can change your life, but you have to do the work.
I think we have time for one more. Ellen, one more question?
I have a question. Can I go ahead?
Who is this?
This is Carla Mato. I have a son with ADHD. He's a junior in high school. And this is my first time learning about ADHD coaching. And we've been going the therapy route, and I'm feeling like this might be a better route for us. I was just checking the website, your website, David, and getting a little overwhelmed with all of the letters after the coaches' names. And can you just make any kind of recommendation of what type of life coach might be beneficial?
So 2 things. Don't get overwhelmed, please, because that would be horrible. And you're not the only one, because there's a lot of stuff. And so a couple of things. I would go to the coach directory under Find a Coach. And in each of those sections, there is a specific category of expertise. So there's one for children. And we actually have a family program for people that are trained in working with kids and families, because there's a whole different dynamic. And then there's credentials next to their names. And the credentials are explained. My recommendation to you is find the category of children and go look in there, and you'll see the names listed. And then each one of them has a profile. The most important thing is that you feel comfortable with their profile, and your junior high kid probably won't interview them. You will. And my recommendation is they're all used to being interviewed, you interview at least 3 coaches. This is a big time commitment and we want it to work for you. And it does work if you choose the right coach. Go in, interview them, at least 3. And if you feel a connection, and you will know if they're knowledgeable by the questions you ask. They're all knowledgeable about the coaching, but the connection is the most important thing. And you as the mother is the only one that will know who will have the best connection with your child. Now, if that becomes overwhelming, you call Stacy, and Stacy at ADDCA.com, or student at ADDCA.com. That's the best, student at ADDCA. And you tell Stacy, David told me to talk to someone about how to select a coach, and we will help you out with that. So, but it's good to start there and just see what's out there so that you know when somebody's recommending, you'll have a good selection to choose from. But don't let it overwhelm you. If it does, email Stacy. She'll set somebody up to help you out.
Sorry, so I just had one follow-up. So my son is actually in high school. He's a junior. He's 16, turning 17. So that was another thing that was hard for me to look at. Like, he's not a child. He's not an adult. He's really kind of in this in between. So how do I figure that part out?
There is a teenage there. So you didn't see a teenage section in there. Go to the family section, and in those you'll see in their profile they'll say teenagers. Work with teenagers, young adults. And again, it's an important choice to make. So if it feels uncomfortable, email Stacy and she'll set you up with me to talk, and I'll help guide you. Okay. Or somebody will, because this is important. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful tonight.
Yep. Very helpful.
I'm sorry, that was student at ADDCA.com?
Yes. Students at ADDCA.com.
Students with S?
With an S. Oh, no, try both. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Try it plural and try it singular. I forgot. I'm sorry.
No problem.
One of them will work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask my question? I thought we were supposed to put questions into the chat, and I did it a couple of times and it wasn't acknowledged.
So Sharna, I see you have a question. Sharna, do you want to say it yourself or do you want me to read it?
You can read it. I already typed it. It's
So he
fine.
says, Sharna is wondering, how do you suggest getting a spouse or a significant other to acknowledge that they might have ADHD? And I'm going to ask you, David, to make the answer brief since we are now going over time, but
Okay.
I think it's, Sharna's
Great
curious.
question. Great question.
Thank you.
So a really great question. Happens a lot. So obviously you can't make anybody do anything. So that they don't want. So there's a couple things you can do. A lot of people, I'm not saying you have to buy my book, but if he it depends. If he likes to read, there's a lot of anecdotes in there about a lot of adults that have ADHD that didn't want to get coached, that coaching changed their lives. If you don't want that, and he's not a reader, there are wonderful, you can go to YouTube.
No, he is a reader, but just even the whole topic of acknowledging that he even might have ADHD. When I've done a lot of research and one of our kids has it, and I know that it's got a big genetic component, and I mean, I would like bet $1 million that he does. So basically, I kind of practically diagnosed him myself in my mind, and I don't stick it in his face because I see it gets him hot under the collar. But I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions on how I might get him to move closer, further away from being in denial.
Well, so one of the things, the book is written for people with ADHD. He can go to any chapter. He doesn't have to read the whole book. Any chapter in there will be like an aha. I mean, that's what people.
Oh, really?
Yes. That's one way. It's not the only way, but that's the way, because people with ADHD go to the first chapter that's interesting. That's why I wrote it that way. And they don't have to be linear. Like I had a belief you got to read from page 1 to 360. And if you miss a page in between, it's cheating. So I threw the whole book away when I was younger. That's not the case. The other piece is this, go on YouTube. On YouTube, I have some videos I've done, but there are other people that have some wonderful videos, short videos that talk about, look up relationships in ADHD, about how the husband had it and didn't want to do it. This is the same true with kids that don't want to do it. They have to have somebody else. There are a lot of famous people with ADHD. Go check them out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Half of Shark Tank, for God's sakes, is ADHD. Every entrepreneur I ever worked with had
Yeah.
ADHD. So let him know that he's not alone in this, and show him that there's a lot of people like him out there. You go look at the list, just famous people with ADHD, have him look at that list, and then have him go check it out for himself. That was mine. That blows a lot of people away, how many people really have it, and means he can live a good life with it, but not, and he's going to suffer. And you know this, Sharna, because you know he's going to suffer if he doesn't do something about it, because it makes it really hard. And he's got wonderful attributes that don't shine because of it. So this will tell him about that. There's lots of people that have it. Let him go look at those. And if he wants the science and he wants it quick, there's my book, but it's not the only book. There's other books too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
A great,
Very well.
great question. So David, thank you so very, very much. I took copious notes, and there's so many pieces. I love the way you put it together. Yes, we've all heard bits and pieces of what you've talked about, but the way you've integrated it, I just love. So thank you so very much.
Ellen, thank you for having me. Thank you for the work you guys do on behalf of all the people that we serve. I mean, it's tireless work. You guys work so hard, and your love for the people you work with is so evident in everything you do. And thank you for allowing me to be part of that.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. All right. Have a good night, everyone. For those of you who are still here, let me just tell you that next month, Melissa Orlov, who talked about ADHD in relationships, is going to be speaking. She's fabulous, and she really knows about relationships and can be very, very helpful. You can check out her website, but she'll be here the first Monday of May. So please join us then, and have a great night.
Thank you for the program.
Thank you, Sharna. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. All right, I'm gonna end this. All right, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks.